Hello and welcome to today's video. Let me introduce myself first. So my name is Nigel Springett and I'm a chartered counselling psychologist, and I have the pleasure to work alongside my wife Tara Springett, who is a leading authority on the Kundalini awakening process. So we have a joint therapy practice helping clients from around the world through Skype to overcome their negative emotions that flow from their Kundalini awakenings, and then move on to developing much more positive, loving lives. Now, this video today is again about what is a Kundalini awakening. It's the second in the series, the first being about how your unconscious mind opens up. And now we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, how the unconscious minds of other people start appearing to you. Because essentially, a Kundalini awakening is the vast expansion of consciousness. And then it's like your mind starts merging with, you could say, other people's minds. So some of the material that's operating in other people starts becoming plainly visible to you. And you might think, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I'll be able to kind of see through people and know who I can trust, and in many ways it can be an advantage. You know, if you say work as a therapist, and you can see through what other people are feeling at a deeper level, then that is a massive advantage for you as a therapist. But in the early days of a Kundalini awakening, it becomes very strange and weird that you can start reading the minds of other people and sensing their more uncomfortable feelings that are operating below the surface. Now, why should this be so disorientating? Well, it's because in our ordinary lives, the ordinary lives of most people, then in a sense having a mask is the way you go about things. You might not think that to yourself, you know, you might operate your mask in a very automatic kind of way, but you know, there's the self that you present to other people, and there's the self that you experience inside, and there's the self that you've repressed, that you've defended yourself against. A lot of more difficult emotions, things like envy, things like greed, maybe inappropriate aggressive impulses or sexual impulses. A lot of the material that a psychoanalyst might want to explore and uncover with you. And so it is that we're living our lives with a fraction of our minds available to us through the operation of repression. But then in the Kundalini awakening, all that becomes available. And that is disorientating. It's you know, it's much easier in a sense to go through life with one's mask and accepting that the mask that other people are presenting you with is a kind of reality. Now, what's going to happen is that you're going to meet people, you're going to sense their uncomfortable, repressed emotions behind what they're saying, and that incongruence will confuse you. It will confuse you and kind of disorientate you. And it's almost as if with the Kundalini awakening, you kind of yearn for authenticity, for genuineness in other people. In a way, you could say, you want that from me. You know, if I had a cheesy smile on my face, pretending I'm really enjoying making this video, then you'll notice that. and you would feel, oh, this is somebody I can't trust. Now, before you had your Kundalini awakening, you wouldn't notice the difference. There'd be some person smiling at you in a YouTube video, and you'd just accept, oh, they're happy. But now you kind of get the fuller picture, and you yearn for people where you can be honest with them, where they will disclose their more difficult feelings. And often that won't be people who were your friends or your family before your Kundalini awakening. And this is one of the big challenges of the Kundalini awakening. Firstly, other people in your life, your family, your friends, your doctors, etc., will have very little clue about what's happening to you with your symptoms, but also your relationships with them are somehow fractured, because they're trying to keep the old masks up, and you're sensing the incongruence around what they're saying and what they're actually feeling. And this is massively important, because as human beings, we need people. We need support around ourselves. It's through people others that we come alive. And so, you can't just drop those connections and expect to be perfectly happy in a kind of isolated position. And having a social network around you is hugely important. But from now on, that needs to be, you could say, a meaningful social set of connections, and that are kind of imbued with authenticity and genuineness. And we would say, from our point of view, need to be orientated on the spiritual path that you're orientated on. And so we advise our clients very often to look for spiritual communities, spiritual groups that they can connect with. But just because somebody flies under the flag of spirituality, it doesn't mean that they too aren't hiding their more difficult negative emotions. And you need to be aware that charlatans operate in the spiritual sphere, and you have to be careful about who you join up with, which groups you start connecting with. And so our advice to our clients is try out groups, shop around, because in some of them you'll feel at home, like you can be yourself, and people are genuine and fully committed to spiritual development. And others, it's more of a kind of pose. It's what sometimes I call it spirituality light. It's the appearance of spirituality through candles and yoga and so on, but without the raw authenticity of a Kundalini awakening. And it's that latter thing that you will need. You'll need to find, or will want to find, people who have some experience around what you're going through. Another aspect of the Kundalini awakening, with the experiences and relationships with others, is some of the wounds that you're likely to have picked up in this life through connecting with people who have some kind of personality disorder. So it could be people you've known and had to relate to, perhaps in your family, who had or who have say, a narcissistic personality disorder. And as you were growing up, then you had to kind of just live with that, deal with that. And perhaps also you had the sense that you kind of could move on. You kind of forgave them. Oh, that's just dad, or that's just mum, or whatever. But in the Kundalini awakening, all those wounds start resurfacing and become very raw. And initially, typically, they start surfacing as physical symptoms. So they're coming out of the unconscious mind, your unconscious mind, but they kind of belong to these relationships you've had with others. And that's one of the challenges, is to work through all that, to discover that the things you thought you had left behind are still active. And so there is some work to be done in terms of working through those difficult feelings, those difficult wounds that come through these social connections with others, where they, in a sense, pretended to be a good person while at the same time were treating you badly, and very often kind of blaming you for their aggression, blaming you for their envy, and so on. Okay, so that's the second in the series. So that's this video has been about the expansion of your awareness into other people's minds. I will be making 2 further videos about how this operates, this expansion of consciousness operates in the areas of the paranormal, and secondly in the area of spirituality. But I hope that's been of interest for you today, and it may be of value. And if it has, interest or value or both, please give me a thumbs up. I'd be very grateful for that, and look forward to seeing you again. Okay, bye for now.